Hello and welcome to the Tier 1 Transfer Podcast. I'm back on the show again. Last time I was replacing you. This time I'm replacing Jay. Basically, if someone has to not be at work, I'm the one that sorts it. Isn't that right?
Yes, and we're not obviously going to mention about why he's not here.
He's just not here. That's as simple as that.
Jay's took his first day off on Stretford Paddock in about 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. But he's missing an absolute treat here because who have we got coming up?
We have got Henry Winter. Almost didn't pronounce his name correctly.
I can't believe he didn't pronounce his name.
We're basically best mates now as well.
This is the third or fourth time he's been on the show.
And he's captivating every time. He's always got a lot of interesting opinions. He's obviously got a lot of great insight as well. He's quite close to clubs. He's quite close to teams. He's very well respected. He's around the England camp as well. Yeah. And he can tell you a lot about the players and their personalities and how they go on. Because he's very well respected and he's one of the best journalists out there. And we always enjoy speaking to him, and he's very much Tier 1. You don't get much more Tier 1 than Henry Winter.
And all after the England game yesterday, which I'm still getting over, by the way, my voice, whenever I try and raise it above a certain level, just cracks.
Are you one of those? I was going to ask you that, Joe. Are you one of those? Are you like proper fanatical?
I'm not proper fanatical.
Not
mirroring. Really like
your
watching England win.
Yeah, but not your mirroring.
No,
obviously, when I say I'm not like a England fan. Obviously, if I'm watching England versus Germany in a last 16, I'm going to want England to win.
Of course.
I'm
not as much of an England fan as I am a United fan, but I was. Maybe you wouldn't have known it yesterday.
Exactly. If England lose, I get over it faster than if United lose. Put it that way.
We're going to be talking to Henry about Sancho. I mean, to be honest, that's a done deal at this point, isn't it? I don't even think we need
I don't even think it's a jinx at this point. I think it's. The chances of it not happening have to be a little bit under 0.01%.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be talking about Raphael Varane, potential centre-back options, potential forward options as well. I think Henry still thinks we need a striker, and we'll talk a little bit about Kieran Trippier as well. So, let's welcome to the show, Henry Winter. We are joined by, I think you can say friend of the show at this point, can't you?
It's definitely a good friend of the show.
My first time speaking to you, Henry. Thank you very much for coming on. Henry Winter of The Times, of course. What did you make of that performance yesterday? Because being there must have been such an extra element on everything that already seemed like one of those momentous. I was thinking after the game actually that you look back at the highlights of England through tournaments, and most of the highlights we see are, if it's not the goal against Scotland, it's us losing. It's great to actually have a highlight of England beating a big team for once. What was it like being there?
You know, the first thing you have to say about being there, being privileged to be there, was that, when I was driving, you've been to Wembley enough times down the years, but it was the first time I really celebrated traffic on the North Circular, because it meant that life was coming back into football, the fans were coming back into football. And, I've been lucky in the last sort of 18 months, these horrific 18 months for the country, to actually be able to go to games. But if anyone, if the authorities, if the broadcasters, if the clubs, if the chief executives, if the owners, wherever they are around the world, needed a reminder of the importance of fans, well, you guys showed it outside Old Trafford in terms of killing the Super League idea off. But just to have fans back in the ground, so Wembley was only half full yesterday, and it was I'm not a huge fan of the stadium in terms of sort of acoustics and the rake. I think the rake is too shallow to sort of give a good atmosphere. But it's the best atmosphere I've heard there since going back to probably the first half in the Germany game of Euro 96. So 40,000 are there, and the noise outside. There were probably about, I'm guessing, about another 10,000 ticketless outside, because you know how Wembley's built up now. It's, you're not standing in a car park anymore. There's sort of bars and places to go. So a lot of people had just sort of turned up for the occasion outside the ground, as well as the 40,000 lucky enough to be inside it. But the noise was amazing. Harry Maguire was trying to talk to his family afterwards, and it was, there was still the singing going on. There was Sweet Caroline. There's obviously footballs coming home, and it almost felt like a sort of music festival as well as a football event.
Yeah, it looked like it was absolutely bouncing. The atmosphere was incredible, but obviously with us being a Manchester United channel, we paid particular attention to Maguire and Luke Shaw, and he performed very, very well yesterday. And it's two players that they've been criticised quite a lot in the past couple of seasons, but they've really kicked on in the last few months. What have you made of their performances?
Well, I'm going to start with Luke Shaw. Luke Luke came and spoke to us, sort of 7 or 8 of us. We sat around this picnic table. It's quite funny at St George's Park, you're socially distanced. So just before Luke sat down at his table, we all put our microphones or tape recorders on the table. Then he sort of ushered in, so there's no sort of contact. We're about 4 or 5 yards away, and it's all outdoors. And one of the guys asked him, I asked him a question about Hancock. I was hoping he might give Hancock a bit of a kicking because of what Matt Hancock said. We all remember, this is a lifetime ago, but the start of the pandemic, when very naive politicians who should know better, should do their research, came out and gave footballers a kicking, not actually realising, well, first the work that Marcus Rashford was doing, the amazing work that Marcus was doing on child food poverty, but that people at the club, like Harry Maguire, like Luke Shaw, so many people, Juan Mata does an amazing amount of work, but anyway, but the work that the players were doing. So I was fishing a little bit for a footballer gives Matt Hancock a kicking as he gets kicked out of office, and he was diplomatic, but he really did want to talk about the Jose Mourinho criticism, and particularly the 4 corners that Luke Shaw had taken in England's last game. And they weren't great corners, but he was kind of parachuted into the set-piece duty when Mason Mount and obviously the Phil Foden being on a booking, and they've been doing the sort of the set pieces in training. But Luke was fantastic, and he did actually return to it 2 or 3 times. I asked him about Mourinho's man management, and he talked about that. And clearly there were issues there. You could see the way that Luke Shaw has responded to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's probably more empathetic people skills. We have to remember, and it's something I'm very guilty of as a journalist. I forget that the footballers are flesh and blood. They've got issues at home. They need a little bit of love at times. And Luke Shaw has really responded to that. He's actually always been known, going back to his Southampton days, as a player who needs a bit of love. And it didn't really work with sort of Mourinho's tough love style, which does work with some players. So I just thought it was great to hear him talk like that. And then to give a performance like that in a position which he's not totally used to. He's more an attacking left back than the wing back. And we actually talked to him in the warm up to the game and said, you've got a big role here if you're going to try and keep Kimmich, who's probably been Germany's best player in the tournament so far. If you're going to, Goossens as well, to keep him deep. And I thought he did a fantastic job. And then as Germany tired a bit, Luke Shaw moved on, and what a ball he put in for Sterling.
Yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it? And Maguire, another one who, Henderson and Maguire were sort of compared, and both of these players trying to come back from injury. But Maguire's come back and proven himself to, I think, be England's best centre back, and Henderson, is still sort of finding his feet coming off the bench. But how important is Harry Maguire, not just for England obviously, but for Man United as well? Because we'll talk maybe a little bit later about some transfers and centre back and that area being an area United are looking to strengthen. But Maguire's been so ever-present for United. So, he had that sort of problem at the end of last season away in Mykonos, who truly knows what went on there. But some of the stick he got for the mostly price tag that he cost Manchester United, how important is he, and how much do you think he's sort of now moving out of the shadow of that price tag a little bit? Because for so long, that was the only thing people mentioned about him.
He's more than a centre-half. He's a leader. He's very vocal. He gets people going. You saw a couple of the tackles that he put in yesterday. You could just feel the whole team was uplifted because you got Maguire going in and rattling an opponent. And you think, right, we are absolutely up for this. I think you missed him you were probably out. Well, you'd have been watching the final, the Europa League final, and you missed him there. You missed that energy, that sort of intensity. Look, he does have a weakness. He can get turned. People can run at him. But he reads the game well. He also, which is something that England have missed, is that he steps into midfield. Was it 2 games ago he played that killer pass to Harry Kane where he almost scored from, and he brings an extra dimension. He also, England's set pieces haven't been particularly good, but we saw in Russia at the World Cup 3 years ago what an impact Maguire can have attacking. With that love train that he and John Stones would sort of board and to attack the opposing area. But he retained his fitness, and he came back. You always knew he was going to slot into the back line. Look, I know maybe I can't talk about John Stones, but John Stones has been playing well as well. And I think the important thing to say about that is the two work really well as a combination.
Yeah, definitely would agree with that. obviously we can't go through a transfer podcast without mentioning Jadon Sancho, someone that we hopefully, someone
he's coming home.
Someone that hopefully be a United player soon enough. But he hasn't really featured much in the Euros so far. Do you have any kind of opinion or reasoning to why Southgate doesn't seem to be giving him many minutes on the pitch? Do you think it's the fact that the transfer speculation is kind of casting over him, or do you believe it's purely just a tactical or just a personal decision?
I think it's because England have got strength in those areas. I mean, it's interesting. You listen to a lot of sort of German supporters and German coaches and German journalists saying, what a fantastic player he is. And Manchester United, when he arrives, for whatever it is, 80 million quid, will be getting a terrific player. I still personally think you need a centre forward. We've had this discussion before, but Jadon Sancho will bring so much to the team. I mean, he's a terrific. You've only got to look at his numbers in Dortmund last season, the impact that he has with the assists and some of the goals. I think he's a fabulous player, and it wouldn't completely surprise me if at some point they looked at Jude Bellingham as well. Because you can see him slotting into Manchester United's midfield. Because I think when you look at players, there's a club of your stature. It's going to be linked with everyone. Now, it might be agents trying to get new deals or move their players elsewhere. But the key element that any player who comes to Manchester United has to have is personality. Has to have courage to get on the ball. Has to have that strength of dealing with the level of expectation, not simply from fans within grounds, but if I tweet one thing about Manchester United, it's absolutely huge. It's bigger the reaction than any other club. Possibly Liverpool, maybe Arsenal to an extent, City around, but Manchester United is huge. If I go on the fans forums, and podcasts like yours, they're absolutely huge, and players are aware of that. And I think I would say there's certainly two characters in your current squad I won't name, who I don't think have the personality to be a Manchester United player. I think when you see them in the shirt, and you just don't think. They just look slightly nervous and scared by the whole experience. Sancho, that won't worry him at all. I quite like that cockiness to him. He feels he should be starting for England. But I don't quite see where he gets in at the moment. Sterling obviously has to start. Kane has to start. I mean, Saka started because he played well the other day. I don't think I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to ask Southgate, but he'll know what Sancho's like in training. But people say he's a good lad, he's a good professional, and Manchester United will have done their homework on him. I think they should have got the deal sorted earlier, but it seems to be a Manchester United thing that they let it sort of drift on a bit.
It is interesting, isn't it, that even the fact that Saka was given the chance over Sancho. You mentioned Sancho's numbers in Dortmund. He's been, I would say, the best young creative player in the world, let alone English player. So I was slightly surprised that Saka got the nod before him, and then obviously he played well. Someone else who isn't really getting many minutes, and maybe it's for a slightly different reason, is Marcus Rashford, who for certainly the first 2/3 of last season was one of United's sort of star men, getting almost as many goals as Bruno for a long time, kind of tailed off toward the end of the season, this accumulation of injuries, and once again he's a bit part player in a tournament for England. We're getting to the point with him where you kind of think there's talk of this surgery for Rashford after the Euros for his shoulder. That's a couple of tournaments he's missed now for England. What do you think he has to do to sort of get it to where it's not about his injuries all the time? He can maybe take more of a rest, maybe request more time off, but it's sort of affecting his international career at this point, isn't it? His injuries and the way he deals with them, or the way United deal with them. What are your thoughts on the whole Rashford situation at the moment?
His numbers are pretty good. I mean, what's he, sort of 20 odd goals in 64 games?
Yeah.
He, arguably playing out of position. He's had the penalties taken off, and completely understand that, because Bruno Fernandes is, deserves them. But I often hear this debate about Marcus Rashford, not necessarily from Manchester United fans, and I think, for heaven's sake, do you realise in no particular order, what an amazing character he is? Homegrown, what he's done for the club in terms of... I mean, Manchester United, for some people, they've got this huge corporate monolithic image. We all know the Glazers, I get all that, but there's always been this association with Manchester United about money. You then have someone like Marcus Rashford, who comes from the streets of Manchester, from Wythenshawe, who then basically does the job of government, i.e. feeding this country's kids. And when people are questioning him, I'm thinking, hang on a sec, They're kids who are now going to sleep at night having had a decent meal. And I think it's one of the biggest indictments of this country that we haven't been feeding our kids. And Marcus Rashford has taken that on because of his. If you've met his mother, Melanie, you understand where Marcus's commitment, his drive, his compassionate side comes from. And look, it doesn't eat up too much into his week. He's totally focused on it. And I've been over to his house, and there has been, not for obviously till 2-3 years, and there has been, a physio. There's been I think there was a sports psychologist there because he works with them, whether it's club or whatever, all players do. There was a dietitian. This is supremely professional. I mean, have you ever seen him when he swaps shirts and he takes his shirt off? I mean, he's whippet thin. He could be like an 800 metre or 400 metre runner. I don't think Manchester United, maybe it's a club, maybe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, if we're being quite honest, has to answer this. If he actually realises what a special person Marcus Rashford is, as well as a special player, he goes out there and plays. Do you know the pain he's going through at the moment? So he's got this shoulder, which will probably need an operation. He'll be out for 6 weeks. He's got an issue with his left foot, which swelled up on the flight out to, was it Gdansk? Where was the final?
Yeah, Gdansk.
Yeah. And so he has trouble putting his boots on. But does he complain? He just goes out there and he plays. And you talk to the people around the England camp, you talk to Southgate, and they go, "This is a really tough kid." We know he's a tough kid because of the area, the issues that he went through as a kid. Physically strong, mentally strong. And the criticism of Marcus Rashford, I just find totally bemusing. He's feeding kids in this country. He's putting his body on the line for Manchester United. Remember, was it a year and a bit ago he got brought on in the Wolves game when he was protecting a double stress fracture in his back? This is sometimes, maybe it's Manchester United better than I do, but sometimes you place more pressure and burden and scrutiny on homegrown players than someone who's sort of come in from the outside with a big fee. I think if Marcus Rashford came on the market now, I don't know how long his contract is, he will go for a huge amount of money because of what he brings on and off the pitch. So I'm quite protective about Marcus Rashford because I talk to people around him. I've interviewed him. I've talked to the England people, and they know what an absolute gem Manchester United have got. And I hope Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I'm sure he does appreciate Rashford's importance. But he's a special player. But he needs looking after because he's the type of character. So I'm going on a bit because it annoys me, this whole debate. But he is the type of character who will go again and again for Manchester United because he loves putting that shirt on, even when he's in pain. Now, I know a fair few other players who would actually say to the boss, "No, actually, I need time off now."
So do you think it's the case then that he does need that time off, and it's up to the management, it's up to Solskjaer, it's up to Southgate, I mean, who's not been playing him, almost to his credit, I suppose, because as much as I want to see Rashford on the pitch, I want Marcus Rashford to be healthy for all the reasons you've just mentioned there. Do you think it is up to them, or do you think some players have a body type or the way they're sort of, just the way their career is, they are going to have more small injuries than other players, and he's going to, have to live with that? Or do you think it is a case of Solskjaer needs to just go, "You're not playing for 2 months," or "You need a rest"? Because something's kind of got to give here. Like I said, two tournaments now, he's kind of been sidelined. I know the World Cup was a different situation, but it looked around Christmas time that Rashford was going to be one of the first names on the team sheet for England. And now, because of this sort of persistently playing through injuries that is partly due to his, like you said, strength and how willing he is to do that, and partly because he's not being protected, what needs to give here? Do you think it is just up to the manager to say, take 6 weeks off, take 2 months off, we need to get you back fit?
I think that'll be dictated to by the doctors. I think they'll look at Marcus Rashford's shoulder and decide, you've been carrying it for a while, you are going to need an operation. We spoke to him at camp. He said, listen, he may need an operation. So I'm slightly sort of taking it another stage further and surmising it. It wouldn't completely surprise me if he didn't play until September. I think he probably does need, if he has the operation, he'll need 6 weeks off, and then sort of to come back in. There was a case, you'd have to ask Manchester United whether they might have preferred him not to have played in these Euros and actually had some resting. Remember these sort of academy kids, who've played particularly in England age groups. I know they're well paid, I know they're well looked after, but they're still flesh and blood, and they're bones, and injuries can build up on them. Michael Owen, if I'm allowed to talk about Michael Owen, he played every summer as a kid, and eventually it caught up with him. I'm not saying that will happen with Marcus Rashford because he looks after himself, magnificently, but I think he does need a break. And I think when the Euros are over, he'll go and have a holiday, he'll have the operation, and then he'll come back fit and refreshed, maybe in September time. That is me with no inside information, just surmising it from what I can gather.
I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and of course you can mention Michael Owen for the winner he scored against City at Old Trafford. On a great.
What Marcus is. Sorry to interrupt you. Please appreciate what is. Look, I'm on the outside, so I don't have necessarily the sort of the emotional attachments you have and the scrutiny you put players under. But really appreciate what a special person and talent you've got in Marcus Rashford.
Definitely.
We absolutely love him.
No, we do love him, and homegrown, Manchester born.
Yeah.
All the right stuff. And what we haven't really touched upon, we did mention it slightly when it came to Jadon Sancho, but it's possible transfers at United. Obviously, we've mentioned the right winger in Jadon. There's been mention of centre halves and CDMs, but you've mentioned earlier that you think United possibly need a centre forward. I wanted to ask you whether you had a centre forward in mind that you feel like United should try and sign this summer.
Well, I'm delighted that Cavani's staying on another year, because I just think for Greenwood's development, let alone Cavani's impact on the pitch, I think that is going to be huge. I just think the intelligence of him, the professionalism. I mean, you look at him close up, and he's gaunt because he's such an athlete, because he's so sort of committed. I think he is. Yeah, I think he's a good. But a club of Manchester United's stature and with the chances that you can create, and if you've got a Paul Pogba in his French form, playing passes like that sidewinder pass we saw the other day, if you've got a, I don't think I assume Harry Kane's going to Manchester City, but if I know there are issues in terms of dealing with Haaland and his agent Raiola, but I just thought if you put him in that strike force, I just think that he will be terrific.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Definitely agree. I think centre forward is something we could definitely address. Cavani's obviously a bit of a stop.
Greenwood long term. Sorry, just interrupt you. Greenwood long term, two-footed, nerveless. Just the way he takes that touch, the way he slows the game down, where he makes everyone almost march to his tune, the way he scares defenders in the box. I think if he listens and learns from Solskjaer, I think you've got an absolutely exceptional player, but he needs to continue this rate of development. If we're talking about the here and now, I mean, Haaland will come in and will absolutely tear up the Premier League. But I just think there are too many complications with him, and you imagine he's going to stay another year where he is.
Yeah, especially with that supposed release clause coming into place next summer.
And the Raiola effect.
There's going to be a real fight for Haaland next year, and then when that comes in. A couple of other positions quickly. Centre back is one that seems to be sort of next on the list, and I mean we're all talking as though this Sancho deal is done. It looks like it's done, doesn't it? If we're honest, Varane's been mentioned. There's been other sort of players from the Premier League mentioned. What do you think of United's need for a centre back, and also someone like Varane, especially now? I think, like we said, with the form of Harry Maguire over the last sort of 6 months or so, especially, that's quite a sort of. That could easily be one of the sort of better centre-back partnerships in Europe, that couldn't, if it was someone like Varane to come in next to him. You're looking at a real top-class centre-back partnership there.
Yeah, although the way he got bullied in the last game,
I
think he might get bullied, which is surprising, because he's tall, he's physically imposing. I think he would be terrific in terms of what he can do with his feet, bringing the ball out, his interceptions, his decent pace. I think he would be outstanding. I just wonder whether there's a little bit of extra negotiation going on for him internally. It's a huge deal for Manchester United to land, and they're not always been. Look, they're taking them 2 years almost to get Sancho. So I think Varane would be difficult. I mean, Lindelof is an impressive character, but I don't think he's top Manchester United standard. And I think that Maguire, because he is so important, he still needs a little bit of pace around him. But it was interesting. I mean, the sort of debate about other positions. I was watching Dalot play, and I actually thought, that's not the player I've seen at Manchester United. So obviously that's fullback. But I think Sancho will be your main marquee signing, but I agree, a centre half as well. You've still got to address central midfield. I still think long term Bellingham will come in there. I just think he's got the look of there's something about him. He looks like a Manchester United player, playing with his head up, like a Scholes did. He's box to box. He can tackle. He's intelligent. I mean, he turned 18 yesterday, and he's just. I mean, he'll be an England regular for the next 10 years. So if you can get him, get him.
I was gonna say we're gonna have to deal with Dortmund again when it comes to signing Bellingham.
Trippier is another one who it looked as though there was real strong interest in United for Trippier. We're looking around sort of 10, 20 million kind of mark, and then it seems as though Atletico Madrid have said we want his buyout clause, we want 43 million euros or whatever it is. Do you think that deal sort of moved away now? That's kind of dead, because as much as Kieran Trippier is a good player, 43 million euros or the reported fee for him, that's a lot of money, isn't it, for someone who's getting on and the other side of 30, etc.
Yeah, but he's a warrior. You just look at the attitude and the hunger and the professionalism he's got. I mean, the only thing is I don't think fullback's really an issue for you. I know he can play either side, but he's not the type to sit on the bench. So I don't think. I mean, you've got a fantastic right back, you've got a fantastic left back. So I don't think that's so much of an. I don't think you really need a Trippier at the moment.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure about United kind of focusing on a right back area, but if you kind of put it a little bit more generally when it comes to United going into next season, where do you think United specifically need to improve in terms? You have mentioned centre forward, but I just want to know, in your opinion, how far away do you feel like United are from challenging for a title next season in terms of how they negotiate and navigate the transfer window?
You've got to sort the goalkeeping situation out first. I just think that's huge. I mean, I'm a big Henderson fan. I know he had 1 or 2 mistakes. I know that's not necessarily transfer related, but what are De Gea's plans? Does he want to go back to Madrid? Would the club and the coaching staff have the faith in Dean Henderson to say, right, you are now the number one and we are going to be with you even if you make some mistakes? I think Dean Henderson has, coming back to character, nothing scares Dean Henderson. I remember it was only under 21 game in 2019. He made a bad mistake. I think it was against France. And he just immediately put it to one side and he just got on with the game. And then what was impressive is he came out and spoke to the media afterwards. He didn't hide. He said, yeah, it was a bad mistake. And then he played well in the next game. So I think he's got that personality. But I think so it's not a transfer situation, but I think that's an important story, the narrative that Manchester United have got to address. Definitely a centre-half. Central midfield, the eternal Pogba question. I mean, you see some of his performances at the Euros and you think, couldn't he just slip a France shirt underneath his Manchester United shirt? Because, there is a special player in there. I'm a huge McTominay fan. I'm more a McTominay fan than a Fred fan, although Fred had a sort of pretty decent 2/3 of the season. I still think you need reinforcing in there. I'm sure there are players coming through from the academy who may be able to step up longer term. But I would... At some point, you're going to have to address central midfield and the Pogba question. At some point, you're going to have to address the goalkeeping situation. And that's something that Manchester United really need to look at now. But Henderson and Bellingham, long-term, definitely.
The Pogba thing is going to be... It's coming to a real crescendo that now, isn't it? Because he's going for free next summer. We're trying to get some money from now, or we make him sign that, or get him to sign that contract. It's going to be... I think we'll probably find out in the next few weeks for that one, won't we?
Yeah, and then it's about finding a replacement. But like Henry said, Bellingham.
Yeah, Bellingham. He's not moving again, though, yet. We need to wait a little bit for him, I think.
Different players as well. I mean, if you could put Bellingham and Pogba sort of side by side because of Bellingham's energy and his intelligence and covering, and then Pogba's just sublime passing.
Yeah, I remember one of my mates actually who played for Huddersfield a couple of seasons ago. He played against Bellingham when he was 16 and he said he's never seen anything like it. Like someone that age, running the championship. Amazing. Running the championship game at 16.
I can guarantee over the next 2 years you will be linked every week. Well, you know what the media are like. We link you with everyone, but you'll be linked heavily with Bellingham.
Yeah, because we already know we want him. So it's just going to carry on from there. Right, I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much for coming on again, Henry. Really great to chat to you for the first time, and obviously Ronaldo. Basically best mates with Ronaldo at this point.
Always, I enjoy Henry's the most. Yeah. Hopefully The others don't watch this.
No one watches. Don't worry. You say that every time. No, thank you. Yeah,
Thanks
cheers.
for having me on. Stay safe, guys.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right, cheers. See you later.
Always great to chat to Henry, innit? I mean, I say always. I want to chat to him once.
Little debut. I thought you were a little.
Go on.
A little starstruck. Yeah.
Maybe.
A little bit. I get
bit.
that as well. He's the guy in it.
I enjoyed it. It's great to chat to Henry. And the Rashford stuff, I mean, we'll go into the transfer stuff, but the Rashford stuff, whenever he speaks about Marcus Rashford, I'm always not surprised at this point, but sort of happy, and he sort of sees Rashford the way United fans see Rashford, don't they? I know a lot of people around the country have taken him into their hearts over the last sort of 12 months, Marcus Rashford, but Henry Winter really seems to get what we get when we look at Rashford and you see him. And talking about his career and these injuries, he is getting to a really important point now, Rashford, anywhere he kind of has to maybe look at the way he deals with them going forward, because if not, like, he said there, Michael Owen, and every time it happens, it's not just Henry, everyone does it. I'm trying to compare him to Michael Owen, but Rashford is being compared to Michael Owen because of the injury stuff, and we all know what happened with that, and he needs to sort of, I don't know whether it's up to him.
I've mentioned this. I've got a big fear of. He started out. He's 18. He's played pretty much non-stop since. His play style, his athleticism, the injuries that he's having are quite wear and tear based as well in terms of when it comes to stress fractures in his back. I have that kind of Rooney worry when it comes to Rashford. I think he can possibly, obviously God forbid, burn out early in his career. He gets to 28, 29 and almost the tank's empty. And I think we need to think about that. We want Rashford for years and years and years to perform at the top level. We don't want him to be forced into our starting 11s and playing week in, week out and being brought on for half an hour in meaningless games and stuff when he needs to kind of get his fitness back. He is constantly, it will sound like an excuse, but it's actually factual that Rashford has played for about 18 months with continual injuries. He's not
the Liverpool game in 2019 or something, wasn't it? Or 2020? Yeah.
He's literally, and I don't think people realise how hard that is to do. And I think as much of it is mentally, and I think it's a testament to his mentality that he's been able to play the way he has and to commit to United in such a way because he cares. With those injuries in the back of his mind and the way that's affecting his body, and I think the fact that he's not played much for England could benefit in terms of, I think he needs a long off season. He needs to get those surgeries. He needs to sort himself out. And I think if he comes back with that confidence and that kind of monkey off his back when it comes to the injuries that he's dealing with, I think we can see a proper, different and a stronger Rashford next season. But he said a lot, and I think he's fairly confident. He's pretty much confirmed that Jadon Sancho signing.
There was no flicker, no nothing.
He said he's coming home.
He's coming home.
Well, it's almost not breaking news now. It's almost expected.
Like I said, we knew that, and going into the interview, we sort of knew that. He did speak about Rafael Varane a little bit. He's questioning whether Varane. Do you know what? He's using.
He's almost agreed. For like
he said
contractual,
there's an internal sort of conversation to be had with
bargaining
Varane.
For a new deal.
Yeah.
I think it's also that, and he didn't seem too convinced by Varane as well.
Well, he said he wasn't great for France the night.
Yeah, I know people criticise me for what I've said about him, and I've doubled down, tripled down on it. It's not that I've not. I think he's been a great centre half. I just don't think he's been as great as he's been expected to be, which is he was expected to be a 99. 100 out of 100 centre back.
One of the
greats. He's probably made it to about 90, which means he's better than most.
Yeah, he's still a very good player.
He's a very good player. He's had a lot of success with club-wise. But I'm going off eye test of when I've watched him over the years. And a lot of Madrid fans have been saying sometimes he can be a little bit inconsistent and a bit suspect at times. And unfortunately, I think that's just the story of a centre-half, realistically. Yeah. When you're a defender, when you're a centre-back, you've got no cover. No. You've got no backup. If you make a mistake, it's front page news. They're in on goal.
Yeah. And even you look at someone like Van Dijk.
Being harsh.
No. And look at someone like Van Dijk, who was great for a season. Almost.
He had a few mistakes still.
He did. And also, he didn't get good. No one knew he was till he was 28.
Yeah.
Like Rafael Varane has been one of the most well-known centre-backs since he was 18 or 19.
Don't get me wrong.
Of course, he's made some mistakes.
Don't get me wrong. As you've said, he's still quality because if he comes to United, regardless of what I said, I'm just put in what I've said in kind of summary. Don't know, I've slapped the mic.
Don't worry about it.
Varane and Maguire as a centre-back partnership is, as you've mentioned, possibly right up there, or arguably the best in Europe.
It's certainly one of the,
especially the way Maguire's kicked on recently. He's become a proper centre-back.
Yeah, and some of Maguire's.
Wait until he starts scoring his headers.
Yeah, and I'm not even holding out hope for that, because if he
had a couple yesterday.
He had one especially that he put wide, didn't he? But Maguire is, when you see teams that are meant to have him without him, you see how good he is. And when you see even now when he plays, bringing the ball out, some of the tackles yesterday, and there's a point about 80 minutes in where after England's second goal, where they just started chipping the balls into the box, and I was like, we've won this, because of all the centre backs in Europe, you do not want to be chipping balls into the box
gonna
for
get
Harry
his head
Maguire.
on that.
He will win every single one, and he did, and Stones did as well. But yeah, I think Maguire and Varane, obviously Henry there suggesting some caution with that one. He said it's going to be a difficult deal to do, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it does sound as though United are interested, and I think he would be brilliant if he came.
Henry's doubled down a few times when we had him on, saying that quite differently from everyone else, he thinks centre forward's a big need for us. And I think it's just one of those where he's thinking about, we've put a lot of stopgap centre forwards in. We've had obviously Van Persie, we've had Falcao signed, we've had Cavani. It's usually people towards the end, even though Van Persie was an absolute revelation. It's not like we had him for that long.
We got 2 seasons out of him.
Got 2-3 seasons out of him. I think United are looking for that centre forward where he's like, comes in, he's 23, 24, around that age, even younger possibly, and we've got possible sell-on value as well. Yeah. And then you've got years of production. Yeah. And I think that's what he's thinking about, because Cavani possibly, the way he can't play every week as well. Yeah. Martial, there's question marks. I still always will believe, whether Martial likes to believe it or not, he's a better left inside forward, left winger than he is a centre forward. Anyway,
so much more dangerous there.
So much more dangerous there. We just need an out-and-out striker, and he has mentioned that he wanted United to go and sign Kane in the past, but I think he's almost succumbed to the fact that he is going to be going to Man City by the looks of things. And I'm not quite sure Kane suits United anyway, but it's going to be interesting to see. But the fact that people have such varying opinions on positions we need to strengthen shows that there's a lot of holes we need to fill. Yeah. And we need to do that this summer if we want to challenge, because if we don't, I think we'll be looking up at Chelsea and City.
Yeah, especially the way Chelsea kicked on after Tuchel came in. There's a conversation to be had there about, can we cling on to second spot, let alone push for first. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, it kind of shows there are a few weaknesses left. Centre-back, it looks as though we're going to be going for something. Sancho, I mean, we're not Fabrizio Romano, we're not Man United official tweet, but that's happening, isn't it? There's no doubt about that.
You've heard it here first.
You've heard it here first. No, up until this point, people are going, Sancho ain't going to United.
ITK. Jadon Sancho will sign within the next month.
Rumour has it Jadon Sancho is actually maybe on his way to Manchester United. You heard it here first. Right, thank you very much for joining us.
Could be walking.
Thank you.
Take a while.
Thank you for having me in place of Jay. How was it?
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, wasn't it? We don't do many videos together these days, but I enjoyed
quite a lot of hair on this podcast.
There's a hell of a lot of hair on this podcast. Thank you very much for joining us at home. Thank you again to Henry Winter of The Times for coming on. I mean, I'm sure you all know who Henry Winter is, but if not, check out his written work as well. I was reading his match report yesterday for the England game. He's a brilliant writer, one of the best in the country. I'm sure a lot of you know who he is, but if you don't, do actually check him out, because he's a sensational writer and one of the best we've got in this country. Again, thanks Ronaldo. Thank you to everyone at home. We'll see you in a bit.